The most dangerous lie in your life may not be something anyone said to your face. It may be the voice that moved into your chest and learned how to sound like you. It speaks before you act, before you risk, before you even breathe fully. It lowers your head in rooms where no one has judged you yet. And little by little, it convinces you that shrinking is the same thing as being safe. That is why you can smile in public and still feel erased in private. You laugh, respond, work, show up, and seem fine from a distance. But inside, you keep measuring yourself against people who are not living your story. You reduce yourself in silence, edit yourself in silence, reject yourself in silence. After enough years, the wound stops feeling like a wound and starts feeling like your personality. This is where Buddha's teaching hits with terrifying clarity. Suffering does not come only from what happened to you. It also comes from what the mind keeps doing with what happened. It takes pain, wraps it in repetition, and calls it identity. Then it asks you to spend the rest of your life defending a version of yourself built in hurt. So the real damage is not only that you were cut, it is that you started speaking from the cut as if it were your truest self. You began to believe the insult, the neglect, the exclusion, the coldness, the abandonment. You turned old moments into private laws and made your own mind their courtroom. Now every new day gets judged by a sentence written years ago. That is why even small things hit you harder than they should. A delayed reply can feel like proof that you do not matter. A minor mistake can feel like exposure, as if your whole life has been unmasked. Someone else's success can land in your chest like a personal defeat. What should have been a passing moment becomes another brick in a prison you keep rebuilding. And the cruelest part is how normal this starts to feel. You wake up already negotiating with your own worth. You act as though you must earn the right to take up space. You walk into conversations internally, apologizing for existing. You call that humility, but sometimes it is only fear dressed in good manners. Buddha never taught people to worship the ego. He also never taught them to worship their broken image. He pointed to something far more radical than self-hatred or self-glorification. He showed that the mind clings, labels, invents, and then suffers inside what it invented. That means the story you keep telling about yourself may feel intimate without being true. Think about what happens when you look in the mirror. Most days you do not see a face first. You see old comparisons, old remarks, old failures, old embarrassments. You see memory layered over skin until you cannot tell what is present anymore. Then you call that distorted reflection honesty. But pain is not honesty just because it feels familiar. A thought is not truth just because it arrives quickly. An accusation is not wisdom just because it uses your own voice. The mind can repeat something for years and still be wrong. Repetition creates conditioning, not proof. This is why Buddha's teaching on the absence of a fixed self is so freeing. You are not locked inside one final wounded version of who you are. You are not a statue carved by your worst days. You are not condemned to remain the person your fear keeps introducing to the world. What feels permanent may only be a pattern that has been practiced too long, and patterns become powerful in the smallest moments. You rewrite a message 5 times because you assume your first version is not enough. You want to share an idea, then pull back before anyone can respond. You put on an outfit and immediately imagine criticism that has not happened. By noon, you have abandoned yourself 20 times without making a sound. That is how low self-worth grows, not only through huge traumas, but through tiny daily betrayals. Through every moment you silence your own presence before life even touches it. Through every inner flinch that tells you to become smaller, safer, quieter, less visible. A fractured identity is often built one ordinary minute at a time. Comparison makes it worse because comparison is rarely honest. You see somebody radiant and compare their highlight to your hidden ache. You see their confidence and never ask what it cost them to grow it. You see the finished surface and use it as a weapon against your unfinished humanity. That is not motivation. That is silent brutality. Buddha exposed the danger of attaching worth to appearances. Beauty changes, status shifts, approval fades, attention moves on. Bodies age, roles dissolve, seasons turn, admiration evaporates. If your value is tied to what is unstable, your peace will stay unstable too. Then you will keep trying to build safety on things designed to move. Maybe that is why praise never lands for long. Someone compliments you, and you smile, but your chest stays unconvinced. A part of you whispers that they do not really know you. You receive warmth and immediately prepare for its withdrawal. Even good things cannot rest inside a mind trained to expect rejection. That is suffering in one of its most exhausting forms. Not just pain, but the inability to settle. Not just insecurity, but a constant inner leaning toward lack. You keep waiting for proof that you are finally enough. And because outside proof can never fully hold a starving identity, the hunger keeps returning. Buddha taught that attachment produces suffering. Many people think only of attachment to pleasure, people, or possessions. But you can also become attached to a cruel image of yourself. You can cling to your humiliation as if it explains everything. You can protect your wound because you no longer know who you would be without it. That is a hard truth, but it matters. Some people do not only suffer from pain, they organize themselves around it. They build familiar rituals with it, familiar language with it, familiar excuses with it. Healing starts to feel threatening because pain, at least, feels known. And the unknown can scare you even when the known is destroying you. So you sabotage what could soften you. You dismiss compliments before they can reach your bones. You distrust real affection because it clashes with your private self-image. You shrink from opportunities that would require a larger version of you to appear. You stay loyal to old shame because it feels more believable than hope. This is why observation is not a weak practice. It is one of the most revolutionary things you can do. When you stop chasing every cruel thought and simply watch it arise, something shifts. You notice that "I am worthless" is a sentence passing through the mind, not a sacred verdict. You begin separating your awareness from the noise trying to define you. That separation can save your life, because once you see a thought as a thought, it loses some of its throne. It may still sting, but it no longer rules unquestioned. It may still visit, but it does not get to name you. And self-worth begins to return the moment you stop signing every accusation your mind drafts. You have spent too long living with an inner prosecutor. It comments on your body, your voice, your timing, your failures, your choices. It reviews your day like a hostile witness determined to find evidence against you. It never celebrates, barely forgives, and always asks for more perfection than a human can give. No wonder you are tired. You have been surviving yourself. Somewhere along the way, you may have mistaken this cruelty for discipline. You thought being hard on yourself would keep you sharp. You thought merciless criticism would prevent laziness, embarrassment, or weakness. But fear does not create peace, and self-contempt does not create wisdom. It may push you forward for a while, but it does so with a whip around your throat. Buddha did not teach mindless indulgence. He also did not teach psychological torture. He pointed to a middle way, a path where growth is not built on abuse. You can correct yourself without humiliating yourself. You can become honest without becoming violent. Imagine what that would change inside you. Imagine learning without secretly hating the learner. Imagine improving without calling yourself trash on the way there. Imagine making a mistake and letting it remain a mistake instead of turning it into identity. That would not make you soft. It would make you sane. Compassion matters here more than most people realize. Not sentimental pity, not excuse-making, not self-deception. Compassion is the strength to look directly at suffering without adding another blow. It says, "This hurts," without saying, "Therefore I am less." It says, "This fear is real," without saying, "Therefore I deserve contempt." What if you turned that inward for once? What if you looked at your insecurity and met it with clarity instead of punishment? What if you admitted that your fear of rejection is heavy, but refused to make it your name? What if your loneliness became a place for presence instead of proof of defect? What if the wound became a signal for care rather than a reason for hatred? Your relationships would change too, because low self-worth distorts love before love even arrives. You start accepting crumbs because a starving heart learns to call crumbs a feast. Or you reject real tenderness because it feels too clean for the dirt you believe you are. Then you wonder why closeness keeps turning into anxiety. A wounded self-image can make chaos feel familiar and peace feel suspicious. You may call intensity love because calm does not activate what you are used to. You may call anxiety passion because your body has learned to confuse tension with meaning. You may stay where you are diminished because being diminished feels strangely normal. This is how pain quietly chooses your future when you do not question it. And still, none of this means you are doomed. Conditioning is powerful, but conditioning is learned. What is learned can be seen. What is seen can be interrupted. What is interrupted can slowly lose its authority. That is why Buddha offered a path, not a slogan. A path asks for practice, return, awareness, honesty, repetition. Not one dramatic breakthrough and then permanent peace, but many moments of catching the mind in the act of turning pain into identity. Many moments of refusing to kneel before an old lie. Real change begins now, not in the fantasy of a perfect later, not after you lose weight, win more, get chosen, achieve more, impress more, fix everything. Not after everyone finally validates what you have begged them to see. Now, in the instant you hear the attack forming and choose not to merge with it. Now, in the second you feel shame rise and do not let it write your whole story. Because that future you keep postponing your kindness to may never arrive in the form you expect. There will always be another condition, another target, another reason to delay peace. The mind that manufactures insufficiency is never satisfied by achievement for long. It simply moves the finish line and invents a fresh accusation. So the healing cannot depend on becoming flawless. It has to come from seeing clearly, seeing how often you have confused familiarity with truth, seeing how often you have called self-abandonment humility, seeing how often you have named fear realism and called hopelessness maturity, seeing how often you have defended the very story that keeps you small. That is where the ground starts shaking, because once you see the mechanism, you cannot fully pretend anymore. You begin noticing how often your mind creates a shortage where none existed, how often it interprets neutral moments as rejection because rejection is what it expects, how often it reaches backward for old pain and drapes it over present life. Then impermanence enters like air into a locked room. The mood changes, the body changes, the thought changes, the season changes, the story changes. Even the version of you that feels trapped is not fixed. You have been acting as though your worst chapter signed a contract with eternity. But what is changing cannot honestly be called your final form. This matters more than you know, because the image you carry of yourself may feel like stone when it is actually dried clay. It hardens only because you keep protecting it from water, truth, and attention. The moment you bring presence to it, cracks begin. And through those cracks, something long buried starts breathing again. Maybe what returns first is not confidence. Maybe it is relief. The relief of no longer having to hate yourself to stay in control. The relief of no longer turning every flaw into a funeral. The relief of realizing that your pain explains some of your patterns without defining your essence. Then another question rises, and it is not a small one. Without this old script of rejection, who are you? Without the constant apology humming under your sentences, who are you? Without worshipping your own broken reflection, who are you? Without giving your wound the final vote, who are you? That question can terrify you because pain has been familiar. The prison may be cramped, but at least you know its walls. Freedom asks for a different kind of courage. It asks you to stop introducing yourself through your damage. It asks you to let life meet more than your defense. And that may be the threshold you have avoided for years. Not because you love suffering, but because suffering has been predictable. Not because you want to stay small, but because expansion exposes you to a wider sky. Not because you are weak, but because the unknown can shake even a tired heart. Still, the familiar ache is costing you too much to keep calling it home. So listen carefully. You are not the insult that stayed. You are not the silence that wounded you. You are not the failure your mind keeps enlarging. You are not the voice that learned how to hurt you from the inside. You are the one who can finally notice that voice. You are the one who can stop treating every thought like scripture. You are the one who can let pain be pain without turning it into identity. You are the one who can stand in a room without apologizing in your spirit. You are the one who can begin again without asking permission from old shame. Buddha's teaching does not flatter you with fantasy. It does something better. It hands you a way out of the trance. It shows that the suffering is intensified by clinging, fueled by illusion, and repeated by unconscious habit. And what is sustained by habit can be weakened by awareness. So the next time that old inner sentence appears, pause. Do not rush to obey it just because it arrived wearing your voice. Watch it, let it tremble, let it pass without becoming your name. Your life does not have to remain a courtroom. Your chest does not have to remain a battlefield. Your reflection does not have to remain a memorial to everything that hurt you. There is a self beneath the noise that does not need performance to deserve breath. There is a dignity in you older than the lies you memorized. Stay with that. Stay long enough to feel how much of your suffering has been a story rehearsed into certainty. Stay long enough to notice that the judge inside you is not the truth, only a habit with a microphone. Stay long enough for the mask to crack. Stay long enough for your real face to begin returning. And when it does, it will not feel like becoming someone else. It will feel like dropping what never belonged to you. It will feel like setting down a weight you mistook for skin. It will feel like breathing without debt. It will feel like finally meeting yourself without the violence. Write in the comments, I am not the voice that wounds me. What traps you is not only what happened to you, but the lens it left behind. You walk into a room, and your mind has already decided someone is measuring you. A neutral glance feels loaded. A short reply feels cold. Silence feels personal. Before reality even has time to speak, your old wounds narrate the scene for you, and you end up reacting not to life itself, but to the bruise-colored version of it your mind projects. That is the real distortion. You are not always living events as they are. You are living interpretations sharpened by repetition, fear, and memory. Buddha saw this with brutal precision. We do not meet the world cleanly when the mind is conditioned. We meet it through what has been stamped into us so many times that distortion starts to feel normal. So your suffering multiplies. First, there is the moment itself. Then there is the story your mind spreads over it like smoke. Then there is the identity you build from that story. And before long, a passing experience becomes another piece of evidence in a case against your own existence. But this does not begin with words. It often begins in the body. Before the thought, I am not enough, there is a tightening. Before shame becomes language, there is heat in the face, pressure in the throat, a drop in the chest. You feel something raw, and your mind rushes in to explain it. Too often, the explanation arrives shaped like accusation. That is why your healing may begin somewhere smaller and humbler than you expected. Not in a grand declaration, not in forcing yourself to think positively, but in catching the sensation before it becomes a sentence, feeling the contraction without immediately calling it failure, staying with the discomfort for one breath longer than usual without turning it into self-punishment. That is where the cycle starts to lose power. Because once you can notice the ache before the verdict, The verdict is no longer automatic, and once it is not automatic, it is no longer absolute. This matters more than you realize. A life can change at the exact point where a body sensation used to become a self-attack. Look at what happens when you make a small mistake in front of someone. You drop something, misspeak, forget a detail, stumble over a simple moment. On the outside, it may barely register, but inside, your entire inner world starts shaking. You do not merely think, I made an error. You think, this is what I am. That is the poison. You fuse identity with incident. A bad moment becomes a final definition. Today you fail and decide you are incompetent. Tomorrow, someone pulls away and you decide you are unworthy. Then one more hard day arrives, and suddenly you have turned yourself into a lost cause. No human being can bloom under that kind of sentence. Because you are not allowing yourself to be a person in motion, you are demanding that every moment reveal a permanent truth about your value. And Buddha warned again and again about the suffering born from this kind of clinging. The mind grabs a passing condition, brands it with me, and then kneels before the brand. But what you call me is far less solid than your pain wants you to believe. Your body shifts, your mood shifts, your desires rise and fade, your thoughts arrive, intensify, dissolve, and vanish. Your perception of yourself changes depending on memory, sleep, fear, hunger, love, and countless invisible causes. So why do you cling so fiercely to one cruel conclusion as though it were eternal? Why do you treat a season like destiny? Why do you turn a wounded state into a lifelong identity? Why do you take one chapter of confusion and call it your nature? The more deeply you understand that experience is fluid, the more your grip begins to loosen. And in that loosening, something vital returns: possibility. But here is a truth that may hurt. Sometimes you keep seeing yourself in the worst light because part of you thinks it is safer that way. If you expect little from yourself, maybe disappointment cannot hit as hard. If you lower yourself first, maybe no one else gets the satisfaction of doing it. If you attack yourself early, maybe you can pretend you are still in control. It feels like protection. It is actually confinement. You trade aliveness for preemptive defense. You trade dignity for the illusion of emotional preparedness. You trade your future for a strategy built entirely around surviving your fears. And slowly, you forget that this strategy is not wisdom. It is exhaustion with good marketing. The mind also has a savage talent for turning everything into evidence against you. One hard day becomes proof that your life never works. One emotional setback becomes proof that you never change. One criticism becomes proof that everyone sees you as lacking. One moment of fatigue becomes proof that you are weak at the core. This is how suffering compounds itself. The pain was already there. Then comes the interpretation. Then the interpretation claims authority. Then your mind convinces you the pain has exposed a final truth, when in reality, it may only be telling you that you are overwhelmed, frightened, and deeply trained to accuse yourself. Your relationship with time deepens this wound.